What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the show, man. Recap with Mo, where we getting ready to get into another episode breakdown of the Johnson series on BounceTv, alright? But before we get into this thing, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss shit snit that's going down, alright? So the episode we getting ready to get into is for season 3, episode number 2, titled Who's Who, alright? So the synopsis for this episode states that Omar, Greg, Keith, and Jarvis attend the annual Quintessential Gentleman's Mixer. Keith ruins the vibe when he confronts his local councilman over his rising rent. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this thing. So we start this episode off, as we often do it with the fellas, man. We start off at the barbershop. So, of course, these characters here in this barbershop are a lot different from the one from the previous seasons that I actually liked a little bit better. But we're going to go ahead and go with what we got right here. So, anyhow, long story short, the fellas come in. Everybody's getting hooked up for for this mixer that's getting ready to go down, except for Keith. Keith has decided to stay at home, get his wardrobe together, and he stated that he had already purchased his own daggone clippers because he was going to cut his own hair, edge himself up, because the last time, if you recall, he went to the barbershop, he was there for about 3 months. For about 3 hours, man. 3 hours too long, if you ask me. So they were all over the place. They were outside taking breaks. He had an appointment at 10 o'clock. Old boy said he was early when he was only 5 minutes early. So he should have known from the get-go that it was going to be a terrible situation. And I know exactly what Keith is talking about, because for me, myself, and I have yet to be in a barbershop probably within the last 15 years. I'm just going to be honest. I went and bought my own clippers and learned how to cut my own hair, because it started to get astronomical. Since we're talking about astronomical, when these folks got their hair fixed up and they got done in the chair, old boy Greg turned around and said, "All right, bro, good, look good, got me sharp." He's talking about, hey, how much we talking about? Old boy said 6'7". He said, what? He said, hold on. Well, what y'all pay? They said, 6'7". That's exactly how they said it, 6'7". Yeah, they paid $67, Greg. And that's exactly what you're going to have to pay, even though you got bald head and all. That's exactly what you're going to have to pay. And then they had the audacity to turn around and ask for a damn tip. I said, hold on, wait a minute. Greg said, y'all want a tip too? Yeah, they were like, yeah, about 20 or 30. Man, you don't get up out of here, bro. Man, come on. So anyhow, going on from there, man, Keith is talking on the phone to Omar. Omar is like, look, okay, well, you good that you didn't come to the barbershop, but please, wear something nice tonight. This is black tie tonight. Do not wear all that artsy stuff you like to wear with all those designs and colors or whatnot. And when you look on the bed right now, you see Keith has his wardrobe laid out like we used to do back in the day. He got his shoes on there so he can pick out all his colors and things. And he has exactly what Omar just told him not to wear out there on the bed right now. So of course he's pissed off. He throws it to the side. But I gotta admit, he came out suited and booted when that time came to go out for the night. So anyhow, going on from there, we head over to Greg's crib. Now, if you have been following the episodes, Greg has this guy by the name of Reggie who he's been leasing his house out to. But Greg is from Chicago. He let you know that from the get-go, that he ain't going nowhere, because he's learned the lingo, he's learned the language of the squatters, all right? He ain't going nowhere. I've been there more than 30 days, bro. So I ain't got to go nowhere. We just gonna be roommates. So anyhow, Greg shows up. Reggie's on the phone talking all loud. Got food every day going where. Got his stomach out. Got his roll wide open. Sitting there. When Greg comes in like, what's good? Reggie's upset. He get off the damn phone. He was like, look, my roommate is here. Anyhow, old boy Greg is like, look, we are not roommates, homie. We are not roommates. But Reggie's like, look, yes we are. Because I'm from Chicago. I know how the game go. And if you notice his shirt, he got that thing on backwards. Now that's quite uncomfortable because I myself have done that, not on purpose, but on accident. And daggone it, when you put those white beaters on like that backwards, they be uncomfortable as hell. So I don't even know how he's walking around right now feeling like all free. Alright? So anyhow, old boy's like, look, yeah, you should have told me that you were coming because I would have got you something to eat. So he's slowly taking the coins off the table, obviously that he's going to give to the delivery person. And Greg is like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? But anyhow, going on from there, look at his face. So anyhow, going on from there, we see Jarvis going over to meet with his mom. Now, if you recall from the previous episodes, there was a situation that went down with Jarvis and his supposed father. Now, his father is claiming all of this stuff that he was stolen from the hospital and, some stuff went down. So he's able to show him this picture with him and his mom. Now, the issue is that's not who he's grown up to know as his mom. So now he's coming to this woman who he's always known and he loves and considers his mom, and he's coming to her just to check in on her. He's asking where Pops is. Pops is away. So he takes this time to ask about, pictures. She tells him that, hey, why are you really concerned about that? I told you that those items burned up in the fire. So you could tell in his facial expression, like he's disappointed at this point because he doesn't want to believe it. All right, he doesn't want to believe that that what was conveyed to him previously is true. Now, I would have to admit that with everything that has transpired thus far, hearing his mom tell him what she stated right here and there, I would have to admit that it seems odd that everything was destroyed and nothing was left. Now, I know that's not too far-fetched, but at the same time, if I need you to give me some proof, you're telling me that you had to change my birth certificate and all of this stuff. It seems a little sketchy. All right. So I'm not saying that I believe old boy, but I'm also saying that I'm slowly not believing the mom at this point. So anyhow, going on from there, I hope Jarvis is able to figure that out. So anyhow, we go from there and we go to the shindig that night, right? So when we get to the shindig, everybody's suited and booted. They come in. Of course, Greg feels out of place. He really doesn't want to be there. Neither does Keith. But of course, Jarvis and Omar, well, Jarvis specifically, he tells Keith, hey, if you want to go out here and mingle, this is the place to be. Keith, if you see over there, those are some magazine editors. So he introduces, himself to them, and they have this whole little conversation. Ironically, he don't even know who they are. He don't even know what magazine they produce for, anything like that, right? Because he's sitting up here talking about, I liked y'all's previous magazine cover with that Ross lady on it. What's her name? What's that lady's name? Daggone. What's her name that plays on Blackish? It'll come to me in a little while. Something Ross. And it was like, I think you're talking about Essence magazine. So he didn't even know which magazine they actually, were the creators of. So he just knew that, I'm a photographer. If you needed my services, I can help you with that, right? So anyhow, going on from there, he calls Omar over. Omar's like, hey, you got to forgive Keith, and Keith walks off to, refill his beverage or, whatnot. So Omar's like, hey, you got to forgive him. He gets a little nervous. But anyhow, old boy, the owner of the magazine, is like, okay, so what do you do? And he was like, well, I'm actually a software creator, and I'm actually working on an app right now. And he was like, oh, really? So he was like, would you be interested in doing, an app for a magazine? And then he said, to be quite honest with you, you know, we got multiple people right here in this building right now that could actually use your services. So that got Omar thinking, because he ain't never thought about that before. And he even mentions that to this guy. So anyhow, just a side note, man, I just think that it's good for us as a people, as a culture, man, to really get out here and network with one another and keep the dollar within the community. You know what I'm saying? Longer than, it typically stays. I think it's about 6 minutes, if that, in the black community. So, I think it's good for us to get out and network. And that's one thing I can say about places like, not Nashville, but Memphis and Atlanta, even like places like Washington, D.C. When black people get together, man, they get together and they work together. And that's one thing that I think we need to do wholeheartedly all over the place internationally, man. So going on from there, we see Jarvis. Now Jarvis is standing here and with Omar, and he sees across the way one of his biggest competitors. We also find out, from there how competitive they've been with one another. Of course, he used to work with her at one time before he started his company, but he stated that he couldn't stand her. Of course, she sees him from afar. She waves at him. He waves back, as you can see here. And Omar's like, she look all right. He was like, man, look, you need to stay as far as possible away from old girl. So anyhow, going on from there, Jarvis sees one of his clients, Sean, who's in the midst. He's talking about a property. Of course, while he's in the midst of, talking to him about, actually scheduling a time to do that, old girl shows up. All right. So that's interesting, because we'll talk about that when we get to episode number 3. But anyhow, that's very interesting, because all this time you've been sitting over there getting your drink on. All of a sudden you see me talking to somebody. Then you show up out of nowhere talking about you listen to his podcast every week, whoop, 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 all of this stuff like this. Now, Jarvis, you're going to have to be a little more competitive, bro. I mean, you are in a competitive arena when it comes to selling homes, definitely in a market such as Atlanta, all right? So if you want to do that, you're going to have to be competitive. You're going to have to do some things that are against the grain just to get your sales in, bro. You own a company now. You got people who are dependent upon you to do what you need to do. You're separated away from your wife at this point. So go on out there and do what you need to do, all right? So anyhow, going on from there, we see Greg, who has disappeared. He's went over there where the food was. The actual chef comes out, and he's like, this ain't no all-you-can-eat type of situation right here, all right? And he was like, who are you? Are you the food police or whatnot? He was like, no, I'm actually the chef. Now, the chef just so happens to be our boy Kyle from Living Single, all right? Now, he looks a little bit different with all the gray on his head and on his beard or whatnot, but he still looks the same, all right? You could tell it was him. But anyhow, they go into this whole little conversation about food and spices or whatnot, which I love to cook as well. It got me a little bit hungry while I was looking at the episode. I ain't gonna. So anyhow, man, Kyle is not Kyle. William Williams, that's his name on this show, right? He says that, hey, why aren't you out here networking? He was like, oh man, this really isn't my crowd. So anyhow, long story short, they exchange information. He tells him, after having this dialogue with him about cooking, he's like, why don't you come down to my spot where I'm cooking? And I want to show you some things, just the basics, some of the things you could do. And he was like, cool, I appreciate that. So William Williams tells him, he was like, see, that's what we call networking. All right. So anyhow, long story short, they exchange information. They go on from there. So anyhow, the next thing you see is Cedric the Entertainer. And I know that's not his name on the show, but that's exactly what I'm going to call him, because that's what we know him as. So he shows up. He's telling everybody about the event. He's so glad that everybody was able to come out to this annual event, and then he introduces one of the councilmen to talk about re-elections and all of that stuff that's going on in the community. All right. So when the councilman gets up there, the councilman is talking all, how all the politicians talk. I'm doing this. We're gonna do this. We're gonna keep it black. We're gonna keep all the businesses thriving. Everybody's clapping, and we're gonna keep everything good right here in this city. All right. So anyhow, going on from there, Keith makes his way to the front. Keith is like, okay, I got a question for you. The councilman is like, okay, what's your question? He was like, well, how are you going to do that? Because right now, all the rent prices and everything are going up, and it's running the small businesses out of business. And he was like, well, the rent is going up everywhere, son. But if you notice in his statement, he never answered his question. He was like, what are you going to do? You telling me that the rent is going up everywhere is not going to answer my question. I need you to give me details. And see, oftentimes these political folks, instead of answering the question, they give you fluff, make you feel good, make you feel like I've heard you and you've heard me, and we move on. No, I want you to really tell me what you're going to do. What's your plan? What's your rollout? And that's what Keith was looking for, because when everybody left, you could tell that the councilman felt some type of way about Keith. He put his eyes on Keith because Keith asked him those hard questions that he did not want to respond to in the public light. All right. So anyhow, and it was so bad, really, because when everybody had left, the fellas were talking about it. All right. So anyhow, going on from there, they were talking about, racing and all of this stuff, and talking about, getting the squatter Reggie out of Greg's house. They was like, no, you need to do that the legal route. You need to go ahead and go through the court system to go ahead and do that, because the old boy has been there more than 30 days. And he was like, look, I got to do something because I'm so damn tired of hearing this bro is from Chicago. They was like, oh, he from Chicago? He was like, yeah, he from Chicago. He let you know every 5 minutes. And they ain't lying, man. Everybody that I met, hopefully ain't nobody listening to me from Chicago right now, but every time I met somebody from Chicago or been around somebody from Chicago, they definitely are going to let you know that they from Chi-Town. All right. I mean, it is what it is, man. But anyhow, that is the end of the episode. Oh, and at the end of the episode, I'm sorry, let me go back a little bit. At the end of the episode, they were talking about racing. All right. And, sometimes we as fellas, as we get older, we'd like to, rehash on some of our old and younger days. So they decide to race each other. And of course, there's a bet involved in that. And we'll talk about that in the next episode recap. But anyhow, that is the review for episode number 2 of season 3. All right. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this show. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, man. The title of this episode was Who's Who, episode number 2 of season 3 of the Johnson series on BounceTv. All right. So with that being said, man, please like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss shiznit that's going down. All right. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.